introductions?
Yeah, we'll do a round robin introductions. Oh, we got Jerry on. And then is the mayor there with us?
Yeah, he's not here yet. He said he was coming.
Okay. So then let's just give it a couple more minutes for the mayor to join. And then we'll do some introductions so you can know everybody here and we can know everybody over there as well.
Very well.
Jerry, how much snow do you guys have in Phillipsburg? Oh, you're muted.
Jerry, you're muted.
Yeah, they didn't get any.
So Sarah Hartley will be DNRC as well.
Sorry. Oh,
Most
most of our wind is blowing to the, our snow is blowing to the south. The wind is blowing so hard, so.
I'll get you that.
You're sending it down to like Beaverhead County area?
Yeah, piling up in the Pintlers. Mr. Wick, how are you doing?
Hey, that's Jerry Grabens there.
Yeah, I looked, I was like, what are you doing there? Are you
I'm a citizen today.
Nice.
Huh?
Nice. Nobody will be yelling at you.
Yet.
Yet.
You get a chance to look at the whole thing now. Everything in green is what's going to be coming out for the floodplain changes. And everything in red is what's
The railroad?
no,
That's
it's
the highway.
highway.
Oh, okay.
As you can see, like, and I'll show you the one spot we were all talking about earlier. This is the Rainmaker gravel pit. That all goes out.
It goes out.
We agree. We all agree on that. Okay, yeah, so this is an area of
Contingent.
we'll need to, yeah, we'll definitely need to look in too. And I've had that conversation with Nadine and everybody. Our engineer, Doug, about the engineer. This is the floodway, which we only get to see just the city part, which is the floodways. So the blue is what was previous, and the red will be the addition.
All on the east side of the railroad track.
Yep,
Green is coming out.
green comes out, red is new, blue is existing. And then this is the draft mapping we did. So this is the floodway changes. So this is floodway. Yeah. So everything in the brown is the less than 1%.
Hey, Brian, it looks like we got everybody online.
Okay.
So maybe we'll do some introductions. So if you want to go ahead and start with everybody in the room with you.
Okay. Brian Colsley, Teton County Planner.
All wet Teton County resident. Mark Cordy, Teton County Weed District in GIS.
Melanie Martinson, Shadow Camper.
Dick Snellman, Commissioner.
Joe Delwell, Commissioner.
Sit here.
And then we'll go ahead around the room here with us. And then we'll go to all our attendees virtually. So I'm Nadine Wadsworth. I'm the mapping outreach specialist with the DNRC floodplain program.
I'm Hannah Schultz. I'm also an outreach specialist with the floodplain program.
John Connors, Water Operations Bureau Chief.
Doug Bruger, engineer with the floodplain program.
Morning. I'm
I'm Laurel Hamilton. I'm chief of our flood risk and floodplain management section at the Corps of Engineers in Omaha District. I was up here for a couple other meetings and Nadine was gracious enough to let me sit in on this one. So thank you.
Awesome. Tracy, we'll go ahead and kick it over to you.
Hi, good morning. I'm Tracy Sears. I'm at a DNRC. I'm the National Flood Insurance Program Coordinator.
Jerry or Mayor, if you wanted to go ahead and introduce yourselves.
I am Chris Hindoin. I'm the mayor of the city of Shoto, and with me are Tom Fraunfelder, my finance officer, and Tira Henry, who is my deputy clerk, and together they do some of our zoning work, all of our zoning work with Jerry.
Yeah, so Jerry Gerbentz with Great West Engineering. I do planning and floodplain administration for the city of Shoto, and then also floodplain administration for lots of other communities around the state.
Thanks, Jerry.
Good morning, everybody.
Yeah.
Sorry. Good morning, everybody. My name is Sarah Hartley. I'm the State Hazard Mitigation Officer, and I work over at Montana Disaster and Emergency Services.
And then we're also lucky we have FEMA and some contractors able to join us. So I'll go ahead and kick it over to Chris.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Chris Gaines. I'm with FEMA Region 8, and I'm the mapping lead for the region.
And then maybe Stu or John, if you wanted to introduce yourselves.
Yes, sure. I'm off mute. I'll just go ahead. Hi, everyone. My name is John Pink. Sorry, I'm not dressed very well. I actually had a kid 10 days ago, so I'm working from home, and yeah, I didn't even realize I had this meeting today. I would have put on some more formal clothes. Yeah, I'm the Region 8 Task Order Manager. I manage the portfolio of work that Region 8 orders through the STAR 2 PTS JV. So yeah, that's who I am. I think I know many of you already from the state. So.
And then, yeah, good morning, folks. My name is Stu Geiger. I'm the STAR 2 study manager for Teton County. I'll be working with FEMA, DNRC, and the communities to ultimately bring this study to effective status. So look forward to working with you going forward.
And really quickly, I realize that maybe not everyone knows who STAR 2 is. I don't know if that's safe to assume, but a quick plug of who we are. So we're the PTS, so we're contractors to FEMA who provide support on various types of projects across the region. So Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Colorado. So that's who we are. I just want to give you guys an idea of it's STAR 2 is a joint venture program with multiple different companies, and we're Dewberry, but there are other companies that work with STAR 2 as well.
No, that's great, John. Thank you. So kind of the layout for today. So just a couple things. We got a lot of people on the call. We did invite Sarah and Laurel Hamilton with the Corps, just so that they can also learn kind of the flood risk and what's happening in Teton County and Shoto. So a little bit of background on both of them. Sarah is the State Hazard Mitigation Officer that runs the mitigation grant programs for the state of Montana. So when we get to the point where we're doing some flood risk reduction, she is going to be a great resource. So having her on the call is fantastic. And then Laurel Hamilton runs what we call the Silver Jackets program. It's a joint interagency program with the Corps, FEMA, and state partners, where we find ways to help communities reduce their flood risk or help communities explain flood risk to residents. So Laurel is here also learning, but hopefully from this we'll come up with some really good ideas on ways to kind of help inform the public and help you, Brian and Mayor and Jerry, as we kind of move forward with this project. So I'm going to do kind of a short presentation. It's not formal by any means. You're welcome to ask questions and interrupt me through this process. If you wanted me to elaborate a little bit. Technical questions, we're lucky we have Doug here to help answer some of the technical questions. And then we'll kind of just look at the maps and the changes and kind of formulate a discussion as we move forward. So are there any questions before we kind of get started? Awesome. And then I did want to say thank you for being so flexible. As we all kind of joke about the snow, right? Like we can never guess. And for you down in Denver, just so you know, we got just a Scotia snow today. So we're all snowed in Helena, and Sarah's actually snowed in at her house. So
I heard.
It's already started. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, Twee and I were gonna go up there, but you know, we knew you were expecting snow, and the last thing I wanted was to be on some 2-lane highway and hit a snow drift, you know.
Yeah.
So good call on our part. I'm glad everyone's safe and secure in their own space.
Sorry, Laurel.
Laurel got to borrow some boots for me today. So I just want to make sure everybody can see my screen.
Looks good, Nadine.
Right, so yeah, the agenda today, we did our introductions. We're going to talk about floodplain mapping and kind of why it's important. We're going to look at the existing floodplain maps for Teton County and Shodo, talk about the project, what the new maps mean for development and regulations. And we're lucky we have Tracy on the phone, so she'll be able to help elaborate if I mess anything up. And then we'll kind of talk about the next steps as we move through this project. So just a little bit of background. These are all the project partners that kind of have helped us navigate the new flood study. So besides the communities and us, it really is a joint venture with FEMA. And I wanted to give a shout out to our contractors that actually did the study. They put a lot of work into this. So here they are all kind of listed. So what's the purpose of floodplain mapping? Floodplain mapping really does help identify risk. And in turn, by identifying that risk, we ultimately will keep people and property out of harm's way. Now, like I mentioned, it's a coordinated effort with the state, the city, the county, FEMA, and all these other partners to really help identify and reduce those flood risks. Now, we don't map any old flood event, and this is a big misnomer, but what goes on these flood maps is what's called a 100-year flood event. A better way to think of this is not in terms of years. It's the flood event that has a 1% chance of occurring in any given year. Now, as much as I'd like to think that floods will follow the lines on a map, these maps aren't going to show the flood perfectly. There could be a blocked culvert or maybe a downed tree, some localized conditions that could cause the water to behave a little differently in spots. But by and large, these maps should represent the areas at risk of being flooded. Now, floodplain maps today are called flood insurance rate maps, and they're used for lots of different reasons. The city and county regulate these mapped areas, and because you regulate the areas at risk of flooding, federally backed flood insurance is available to any resident, even if they're outside of the floodplain, across the entire county. They're used for local planning for where growth and development are occurring. Your local emergency manager should be using these to help determine what areas could be overtopped during flood events. Your county sanitarian uses this for your regulations where septics can get put in. Mortgage companies use floodplain maps to determine if a home they're willing to finance is at risk of being flooded. And the floodplain maps help set flood insurance premiums. So realizing that all these different entities use these maps, we really recognize that these maps should accurately reflect the flood risk. especially in Teton County and Shoto. So we're going to talk about Teton County's history of floodplain maps. So county actually got maps issued back in 1977. At that time, HUD and issued these area maps, that gray area. They used the best information they had at the time to develop these floodplain maps. But as you can see, the maps really didn't change. So in 1983, flood insurance rate maps were issued, and a new study was not conducted for most of the county. They just converted the original flood hazard boundary maps to a flood insurance rate map. So moving into Shoto. Shoto actually had a floodplain map issued back in 1974. Around that time, there was some discussion, and actually the flood map was rescinded, but then it was reissued in 1977. After some discussion with the community at that time and FEMA, a study was conducted on just a small section of the Teton River, Spring Creek, and the Sun River to really understand what was going on in the area. Now, Shoto's a little bit unique. I've never seen these. So Shoto actually has two floodplain maps. The flood insurance rate map is the bottom map that you can see, and that just shows the extent of that 100-year floodplain. But on top of that, a flood boundary and conservancy zone map was issued. And that area in white is actually the floodway. So Shoto actually does have a floodway already through the city limits. This is pretty unique. I've never seen this in any other community in the state. So it's pretty interesting. So recognizing that these maps are kind of old and outdated and things have changed, we started to work with the Paul Wick actually back in 2020 to get a new flood study conducted for the whole county. A lot of the county maps were just those gray shaded areas. They didn't have any type of information that showed how high the water was expected to get. So partnering with the community and FEMA, we at DNRC put in for a grant from FEMA to conduct this new flood study. And this is kind of the background and some of the deliverables from that study. So we worked for a couple of years on collecting data. The contractors that we hired did a really great job of putting together all of that data into their fancy models to simulate where the water is going to go. And now we're at the stage where we have draft data available to start reporting back to you at the community and then start sharing it with landowners. Now, just kind of wanted to go over what goes into a flood study. It's not a quick and fast project. It's something that takes several years. But essentially what happens is measurements are made of the topography around the rivers and streams. And we use both a combination of ground survey and aerial survey, which is the LiDAR. Then we partner with the USGS and help determine how much water is going to be coming down the rivers and streams during that 100-year flood event, and that's the hydrology. Then the survey data and the hydrology are used to calculate where the water is going to go in that flood event, and engineering models simulate it, and those areas are mapped as the floodplain boundaries. So are there any questions before we really get into the weeds of what's going on in Shoto? All right. So this is a figure that came out of the hydraulics report, and kind of what I wanted to show through this is what our contractors were actually seeing when they were simulating where the water is going to go. So one of the first things I wanted to point out, in that hydrology report, one of the biggest changes that's happening on the Teton River is the original hydrology report showed that the 100-year was close around 16,000 CFS. And that's actually going to be a big change because the new hydrology is showing the flood risk is actually greater, and it's closer to 23,000 cubic feet per second of water. So given that, when the contractor put that flow into the model, it actually shows that there's quite a bit of water exchanged between the Teton River and Spring Creek upstream of the town, and Spring Creek just can't handle that amount of water. So it's trying to go back to where it wants to, which is back into the Teton River. And it does that kind of closer through town, where it then moves back over as it joins with the Sun River.
Hey,
So
Nadine, we got a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So Nadine, it's Paul. I'm, if I'm following then, would that tend to be saying that the 64 flood was not a 100-year, but was something smaller than that?
So the 64 flood event was a bigger flood event. It was, what our contractors are seeing is that that was closer to a 500-year flood event.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, well, so some of the other products that I really wanted to kind of highlight in those reports that we showed a little bit earlier are all of the work maps that our contractors put together. Oh, I'm sorry. So the models show that the Teton River will break out across US 89 and then saturate Spring Creek, correct? Yeah, Mayor, that's what the models are showing. I'm sorry, I don't have the chat up here. It's really hard. So Hannah's helping me out monitoring the chat a little bit. And Mary, you
My
can interrupt.
bad. I'll just ask next time, sorry.
No, it's okay. So before we had this really great technology, we used to have to lay the paper work maps out and tape them together so we could kind of see exactly what was going on. But our really great GIS person put this viewer together. This is something that we like to be able to showcase, not just for reporting back to the communities on what the flood risk is, but also to share with landowners. When you land on this viewer, the first thing that the viewer is going to pop on is the draft map results. And it shows the entire study area. So it's very similar to what the flood insurance rate map looks like. So the blue is that 100-year, that red area within the 100-year with the hatching is that floodway. And then the brown is that 500-year, which would take a much larger flood event. And then I wanted to point out some of this yellow. So some of this yellow is just existing mapping. The only reason we have that in there is because, as we know, the Sun River is bouncing in and out between counties, and we wanted to make sure that it was pretty seamless for somebody to look at. Tab 2, and to navigate the tabs, it's down here at the bottom, is the existing mapping for the county and city. So they took all of the paper maps and digitized them, and were able to show them here. And because I'm a visual person, I kind of like to see what the changes are, right? So tabs 3 and 4 down here at the bottom are going to show the changes between the existing maps and the draft maps. So anywhere you see that red is land that's proposed to be added to the floodplain. Anywhere you see green is land that's proposed to be removed. And anywhere you see that blue is no change. So it was already in the 100-year and it'll remain in the 100-year. I'm also a visual person, so we asked our contractors to kind of break it out. And what does that mean? So here's the tables of kind of what the actual numbers are as far as changes are. So for the city of Shodo, there's already 162 acres that are in the floodplain. 248 are proposed to be added, and then 40 are proposed to be removed. And then you can kind of see what the floodway changes are. We also had our contractors break this out by structures. So any structure over 400 square feet. So we assumed like maybe a home or like a large garage. We had those added. So 134 are already in the floodplain. 377 are proposed to be added, but 63 are proposed to be removed. And then we also did that for structures under 400 square feet. So like sheds or little outbuildings. And you can see the numbers there. And then Brian, we also did this for you county-wide on all the study area. So you can see what the proposed changes are across the entire county. And I'll go ahead and let everybody kind of look at it. And then I'll pause here and ask if there's any questions.
Nadine, this is Jerry. Are those numbers for Teton County, is that outside of the municipal limits?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
That's the idea anyway. We
Yeah.
double check it and make sure there's not double counting. But it can be more complicated than you think, but that's the idea. Yes, Jerry.
Any other questions?
Yeah, we got one, Nadine.
So Nadine, I'm just wondering if this is up on the DNRC site now or is proposed to be put on the site just for anybody to review?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the viewer is not up on the site yet. It's something that we wanted to share with you as a report out first, and then we will post this to the project website, link it, the viewer, and then I should have disclosed, I'm sorry, I am recording today's meeting for minutes, and then we will put that into a YouTube video along with my slides so that anybody can go back and see kind of what we discussed today.
In the time frame, roughly? In a week or?
If you just give me a couple weeks to update the project website, that's all I ask. I can get it done hopefully before the beginning of November.
Excellent, thanks.
You're very welcome. And that was Paul, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then, so tab 4 is also a changes, but it's just the floodway changes. So the only place that has a floodway is that area within Shodo. And the reason why is because there was already a floodway there. So we have to restudy that area based off of the existing maps. And it was determined that a floodway was not needed anywhere else in the county. So that's why there's a floodway just through the Shodo area. So again, the blue is no change. It was already in the floodway. It's proposed to be to stay in the floodway. Red is land that's proposed to be added, and green is land that's proposed to be removed because the study refined that area so much. So I wanted to talk about regulations, and like I mentioned, we're lucky we have Tracy able to correct me if I mess anything up. But what does all of this mean for regulations? Because the county and city have floodplain regulations that regulate development within that 100-year floodplain. Having floodplain regulations doesn't mean that people can't build. They just mean they have to build a little bit differently. So any man-made activity in those designated floodplains are required to meet the county and city's floodplain regulations. Floodplain permits are required for new constructions and modifications to any existing structure. New construction and any additions must be elevated 2 feet above that flood elevation. And the floodway is typically where we see the deepest and fastest moving water during that 100-year flood event. And because of that, there is no new construction allowed in a floodway. Floodplain regulations really do exist to protect everyone in the community. And they help make sure that protect property rights and ensure that the actions of one person do not adversely impact somebody else. What about flood insurance? If a building is located in one of those high-risk areas, so within the 100-year or the floodway, and a person has a federally backed mortgage, the lender will typically require that person to purchase flood insurance once the new maps are finalized. Now, if a building is in one of those lower risk areas, flood insurance may not be mandatory, but I want to point out that lenders can require flood insurance anywhere. Landowners can purchase flood insurance to protect their assets, and renters can purchase flood insurance to protect their contents. And I'm pretty sure everyone knows this, but regular old homeowners insurance does not cover flooding. So flood insurance really is an important way to help protect your investment from a flood. Along with some of the other changes and things that I'll be adding to the project website with the viewer, today's meeting, and the presentation, I'll also post these up here. And this really explains kind of what goes into flood insurance rates and how they're kind of determined. So this is just one of the handouts from FEMA and one of the things we like to share.
Hey, Nadine, this is the same information you modified for us, correct?
That is correct. Yep. And I was going to bring handouts up for you and for the city to have in your office. So I have them. As soon as I can get up there, I will bring them with me.
Okay. I have this up on our the county website underneath the planner. All that information is already posted when you gave it to me. So we have it available to the community.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Brian. So I kind of want to talk about where we're at in this process. This is just a tentative project timeline. This is if everything goes super smooth and kind of what we anticipate moving forward. So I already talked about the data gathering and kind of where we're at up to now. Today, we're talking about the flood risk, and we're delivering this information to the elected officials and to our partners. And we're kind of looking at some open houses with landowners later this year. So it's April of 2024. Because kind of what we do is we get done with our flood study And then we really do hand it off to FEMA and their contractors that John was able to talk about, kind of the services he provides. And they really go through and do a deep review and a double check before they put them on preliminary flood insurance rate maps. So they'll look similar to what you already have, except for they'll say preliminary. We're anticipating preliminary maps later this spring. So that's kind of the idea of having the open houses closer to when we know for sure when preliminary maps will be issued. The preliminary maps do not replace your existing maps yet. They're just another form of draft. They're just going on the official firms. Shortly after preliminary maps are issued, we'll have a similar meeting to kind of what we are having now, where we review any changes that could have been made between draft and preliminary and talk about some of the next steps. Because the public's review of these maps and this data is so important, there will be a formal 90-day comment and appeal period after preliminary maps are issued. So that's something that Brian and Jerry will be leaning on you to help support. Comments or appeals come directly to the community, and then they're shared with us and Star 2. If there's any changes as a result of that appeal period, then we go through another reiteration of the maps where there'll be another formal 30-day comment period before the maps would then be issued as effective. So
I have a,
oh, yeah, go ahead.
this is Dick, one of the commissioners. I just have a question for clarification, but you've done the LiDAR. Have you gone through and specifically checked all the locations, or is that still in the works? The next question or the next part of that is we have a lot of people that have used GPS, which only says that it's good within 10 feet. So does the grant cover whoever coming in and working with the individuals that have the homes or the land in the floodplain?
So we'll talk about that a little bit more, but to answer just very directly, when we do survey work as part of the flood study, it's just within the stream itself. We would not go out and individually survey people's homes.
Typically. And yeah, we might, I'll plan to touch base on this a little more, maybe as we're kind of having the conversation towards the end here. So that the effort you were asking about hasn't been done yet, and it's still in the works. And just like Nadine said, we don't usually go to, say, the edges of the floodplain to do spot survey, but in this case, we're looking to have the grant cover some of that validation and verification of those elevations. We are planning to stick to public property though, with that idea that we can't, under the scope of this grant, provide sort of survey information directly on individual homes. So we'll be sticking to things like nearby intersections and otherwise public property that people can then compare to, at least informally. And we may have some time today to get a little more feedback from you folks on where we're going to do that. and Jerry too, we may loop you in directly, but we do have I just saw yesterday the sort of planned out area, like coverage area of that ground check survey. And it looks like it'll cover, as the community has mentioned, the Spring Creek area primarily. We're getting pretty good coverage of that. So I think at least maybe starting with you, Jerry, and you can forward it along to folks. I'd love to get some input to see if there's any additional areas of interest to add to that. But I just got that yesterday in terms of something to share map wise about where we're planning to do that double check.
And then Commissioner, I'm going to add, that's one of the other reasons we invited Laurel to come, because Brian and Laurel and I have been kind of kicking around some ideas to try to help get some of those first floor elevations for some of the private homes through that area, to try to do kind of an outreach campaign on the importance of elevating and protecting your assets. So we're kicking around some ideas. So we were going to talk about that actually on the next slide.
Hey Nadine, who was that speaking right before you?
That was Doug Bruger.
Okay. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Any other questions about kind of the timeline? This is pretty fluid, but it just gives us kind of an idea of how long some of these processes will take. These maps aren't going to go effective tomorrow, pretty much.
Hey Nadine, I noticed that the timeline has changed on that last slide from the final one being, it was mid-25 to early 26. Can I get that updated version so I can get that posted on the county website?
Yep, it's also, I got it loaded on the project website last week too, to make sure that it was updated before the meeting.
Oh, perfect, thank you.
Yep. So some of the next steps. One of the things that we offer as part of the mapping, we have what's called a mitigation technical assistance. What it does is it develops high-level flood risk reduction options that you can then take and whittle down, get them more engineered, and apply for future grants from other agencies. We already had kind of gotten a very informal thumbs up from Brian to ask our contractor, which is Great West, that did the study through here, to start working on that. And all I'm going to ask is Mayor and then commissioners, we're going to send more of a formal letter, a request. If you could just get it filled out and send it to us so we have it in our records. But our contractor's already starting on that process.
Send it up by email and I'll get her done.
Awesome, fantastic. So the idea of this will give you multiple options, kind of like a shopping list, if you would think of it, where you can choose which options would suit the community's needs to help reduce the flood risk. We've been pretty successful with this. We did this for the city of Three Forks, who's also in the same kind of situation, a new flood study. The risk is actually showing that it's greater to the community. They took the memo, worked with their contractors, whittled it down, and they've applied for a grant through Sarah's team to help reduce the flood risk to the community. They haven't gotten the grant yet. They're still working through some environmental things, but it's a really great step in the right direction to help really reduce the risk. It gives you also a starting place. So that's a perk. And then as Doug mentioned, we're going to start working through some additional ground truthing for survey work. Sounds like our contractors got them some information yesterday, so that's great. And then the deliverable from that will be kind of an explanation between survey grade, elevations, and maybe what a handheld GPS elevation could be and what the differences are. So then commissioners, mayor, you'll have that as a nice quick reference when a property owner comes in. But it'll give you something tangible to help explain maybe if there's differences.
Assuming we don't find anything.
Assuming we don't find anything. And then a deliverable for us, like I mentioned, I'll be updating the project website with that viewer that I showed along with this meeting. And then what I really wanted to discuss is preparing for some of the open houses that we'd like to host in April.
Hey Nadine, there's got a question.
Yep, so I'm going to do this because I can't see anybody. So now I can see everybody. Yes, go ahead.
Okay,
So another question from Paul. But I'm assuming that DNRC has probably listed all the communities that they've completed this work in. Because I think that it's in Teton County's best interest to try and touch base with as many of them as they can and talk about the process and how it went for them.
Absolutely. So on the project webpage, you can see all the communities that we're working with across the state. So if you were to, actually, I can just maybe do it right now.
And at this point, it might be a shorter list of communities that aren't dealing with, a floodplain mapping update or that don't have one ongoing. Off the top of my head, Beaverhead County recently had maps go all the way to that new regulatory, and each county, as we list the counties, it's the same situation where the municipalities within were included. So Beaverhead, Mineral counties, and then a long list after that. But those are the furthest along in the process, and all the counties along the Muscle Shell, including Wheatland, Muscle Shell.
So Paul, if you were to just Google DNRC floodplains, this is what you'll land on. There's a couple different ways to get there. You can either go to our mapping program page, or if you just go down here, you will see all the projects that we have across the state right now. And they're in different phases of the project. Powell County is probably the closest with you. You're a little bit ahead of Powell County. Their draft data isn't completely finalized yet. So we haven't had meetings like this with their floodplain administrators and commissioners yet. But Jerry's also a really great resource. Like he mentioned, he's the floodplain administrator for lots of different communities. And we just finished appeal period with you for Broadwater County, isn't that's right, I think.
Yes, just finished. A lot less significant impact than here. So, but nonetheless, that process is done.
So Dylan recently went through this, am I correct?
Yes, their maps went effective back in August.
Is that why they're not shown on the website because they're completed?
Yes, that's correct. So we have about 15 minutes for discussion or any questions that you may have.
So Nadine, this is Jerry, and it's a question that's come up for months now, and I think the mayor and probably the commissioners have been hearing it too. Folks will contact the mayor, and I've gotten emails and phone calls. You know, what can we do about this? You know, this is going to impact my property, and I just cut to the chase with folks. To be completely honest, and anybody chime in here, it's really going to take, depending upon what the final data and the maps look like, it's going to take engineering and surveying if you dispute what is being shown on those maps. Does everybody agree with that?
And I'll add just a little bit more, Jerry. So it would have to be kind of a larger area. So if my home was impacted, survey around my home wouldn't necessarily change the map itself. There's a different process for property owners to go through to get a designation that their home is higher because of map scale. So it would have to be quite a large area to actually change the physical map itself.
Correct. And that's the reason I wanted to ask that question. I just want this on the table so everybody kind of understands the situation. So.
Can I add a couple things to that? Because that's a really good question. If there's an appeal submission that comes through and the appellant, you know, intends for it to be an appeal to change the maps, they need to supply engineering data that's drop-in ready so that we can run the models with that revised data. It can't just be, you know, I don't like the maps, because that qualifies as a comment. So 90 days is really not a lot of time to go from A to Z with an appeal submission. So the DNRC will work closely with the communities in the county to make sure that if there's any areas of concern, you know, we want at the end of the day to put the best map out there that depicts the risk with the given information that we have. So we will work, we meaning, you know, you all, Nadine. But yeah, we're here to support as well, but we like to work with people that have these concerns, that think there's a technical error or a mistake in the methodology that we used to submit a complete appeal package.
And I'll add that one of the big reasons we like to share this data at draft, because as you saw in the timeline, there's quite a bit of time between now and the appeal period. So that really gets this data into yours and the public's hands faster, should they want to try to dispute the maps through that appeal period.
So an individual elevation certificate is not going to have any bearing on this map.
That's correct, Mayor, and they don't. So as of now, even on your effective, if an individual landowner went out and got an elevation certificate and request a map amendment, what they get in the mail is a letter from the reviewer that says, yep, you're totally right. Your home is higher. Here's a letter from us that you can submit to your lender.
That's what they're concerned about, Nadine, more than anything is wanting to make sure that they're not going to be shackled into buying national flood insurance if it's not necessary. And I'm going to give you 100% transparency here. I have been an insurance agent for 24 years. I've sold one policy in that 24 years, and I'm not sure I would buy one after reading the language of it.
And so, Mayor, and this is where we're going to be working really close together. So during that appeal period, those elevation certificates, we aren't going to have landowners submit them yet. We had that happen in Gallatin County. Over 90 elevation certificates that ultimately did not change the maps anyways. So there's going to be a collection with you at the city and Paul at the county, where you're gonna collect all these elevation certificates, information that isn't gonna change the maps. Really, an elevation certificate and a map amendment is a conversation between a property owner and FEMA.
Yeah.
So we don't collect them, you don't collect them, but we will have like a ready go where a landowner can submit against the preliminary maps to hopefully get a determination before the maps go effective. We did it in Gallatin. I think only a few fell through the cracks, but for the most part, it was pretty successful.
I guess I'm not more worried about adjusting the map. I'm just making sure that those individuals who want to spend the money to get an elevation certificate will, and turns out that it's a viable thing, and it does move them out of that need for flood insurance, that they have that opportunity to do that. That being said, if we get an elevation certificate here at the city, do we pass that on to you, Nadine, or Tracy, or Sarah? Who's to go to? Or do we just keep it in our files for later down the road?
So you'd keep it in your files, but then that homeowner needs to submit it through the letter of map amendment process. And there's a website that we can share with them that makes it easy for them to do it.
Okay, so they have that's a step they have to take when they get an elevation certificate. It has to go through that process of submitting it. Okay.
Yep.
And Mayor, once these maps go effective, I mean, that option's still available. What they actually, the information they are getting as part of the elevation certificate is a lot of the same information they'll be required to get for a letter of map amendment.
Okay.
And that's going to really take map. But that's kind of that process after, like, the maps go effective, or if they're looking at doing that process now because of the effective maps.
Okay.
But yeah, we can talk about that afterwards. I don't want to get confused with what on the mapping, and that's where I think like in Gallatin at first, people were rushing to get these elevation certificates, and they were based off of the effective maps, not the proposed maps or the draft.
Okay.
You know, you got to be careful on that. So.
Oh yeah, I get it. Jerry was right. We've been inundated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there is an avenue for private residents to submit better technical data for their home and ask for a designation, which is in the form of a letter that won't change your map, that will maybe remove them from the floodplain.
And let me give you a sort of simpler, if you don't want to commit all that to memory right now, I think a take home from today, if somebody's asking you about that,
covered in the grant.
one point is that we really, we're going to get that viewer out to folks. I've heard stories that people are using the PDFs and sort of looking back and forth. So that viewer will help people wrap their heads around the new mapping results on their property a lot more easily. So that's coming within, like Nadine said, within the next month or two at the latest. And then likewise, we're going to have this public open house in April. We'll be able to talk to individual landowners about that at that open house. And then they'll still have, a year and a half at that point to get all of this sorted out. So of course, people are rightly concerned and they want to know what they can do now. And you can definitely assure them that they've got plenty of time to sort this out, including a few touch points along the way where we'll be able to help answer their individual questions.
We're going to run out of time, but my takeaway today is it sounds like this will move dogs issues in Shoto down the notch and move floodway up the issue. So I might get a break from the stray dogs running around town.
All right.
And then mayor and commissioners, on the viewer, what I showed today is what's going to be available. There's 2 extra tabs that we're still getting put on the viewer. One of them is going to show how deep the water's going to be. So it's the water depth. That's a really great outreach tool to try to help explain things. One of the other things that everybody gets really excited about, when our LiDAR contractor flew the LiDAR, they also captured the elevation around private homes. So LiDAR is accurate, plus or minus half a foot. roughly. So when we get that tab put on the viewer, you'll be able to click on Nadine's home, and I'll be able to find the closest flood elevation to see how much higher or lower I am from that closest flood elevation. So it'll give somebody a starting point at least. They can't use that for an elevation certificate yet. We're trying to get that going at the state, but for now, it at least gives them an idea if it's even worth them paying for a surveyor to go out and fully survey their property. So we just got a couple more minutes. So Mayor, Commissioners, I just also wanted to get like a thumbs up from both of you. Moving forward, Laurel and I were kind of talking about doing those first floor elevations as part of a Silver Jackets project. And we work with Jerry and Brian moving forward. The proposals are going to be due to her by March.
We like to start it in January and officially get letters of support and everything going for the promising proposals. And then the final submission is in March. But I do want to highlight that if we go that route through the Silver Jackets program to do a study like this, we will have a team go out and collect first floor elevations, but it is not an elevation certificate. So we'll just be using that information to provide general recommendations and looking at the community holistically. And we can talk about other flood proofing opportunities and general flood risk. So it's a holistic look at the community.
And it'd be more of like a flood risk awareness campaign, right? To explain to the residents, you know, this is your risk. This is ways that you personally can reduce your risk moving forward, and to protect your property and assets. So it would be really a flood risk campaign, which Brian will help you with your CRS stuff that you're working on.
That was my question to Tracy, was that'll help us with our score, correct? So you can give a higher percentage of discount to individuals that are federally funded for their flood insurance discount, correct? That'll go towards our scoring.
That could be one of those items that could provide some additional credits for the community under that community rating system. Yes.
So just because we're getting to that 11 o'clock hour, Brian, Jerry, I'll be reaching out to you to get you all the mitigation technical assistance form. If I could get signed copies from the county and the city. And then Laurel and I will be working with you all on that Silver Jackets project. And then we're going to start planning for public open houses in April, if that sounds good to this group. Thanks,
Yeah, hey,
Chris.
Chris, hold on to that package, you know, since you're gonna pay for overnight. We'll add our letter in there for you.
And then if there's questions, Mayor, Commissioners, you're welcome to call us with anything you might have. We're here and we can help explain anything that you may need. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Nadine.
Thanks,
Thank you,
guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Jerry.
Thank you. Bye.
You didn't leave yet. Can you stop the recording though?